Let's talk about Dom Perrottet.
Oh, yeah.
Well done, Dom. The United Nations decided they can't be bothered with China and Iran and Venezuela
North Korea.
North Korea. Why bother with that? Let's go to Queanbeyan and check out the torture cells that are occurring. Queanbeyan. So the United Nations rocked up to Queanbeyan, and the Queanbeyan jail said, no thanks.
Yeah, well,
you're not in. You haven't made an appointment. You're not in.
So what happens is, because Australia is a party to this Commission on the Prevention of Torture or something like that.
Yeah, OPCAT or something like that. It's the optional protocol to the Convention Against Torture, which is an international treaty that we signed in 2017. Roadmap to OPCAT compliance, October 2022. The Commission has released a report outlining activities required to expedite Australia's approach to implementing the United Nations optional protocol to the Convention Against Torture and other cruel, inhuman or degrading treatment or punishment. But no, this seems to be a joke to the outsiders, which I'm going to call them the insiders from now on.
You know, they sent these inspectors around to rock up unannounced. Well, the Perrottet government said, no, you're not coming into our jails just unannounced, because you know that with all of these sorts of things, we know historically that Australia always cops it from the UN. You know, there was a great report that UN Watch out of Geneva just did about Michelle Bachelet, the outgoing human rights commissioner, and you know, she criticized personally North Korea as many times as she criticized Australia. So you know, I mean, like, the UN are not honest brokers, and you would not want them anywhere near, because you know, they'd say, oh, you know, if you look at the cells, the toilet paper was hung in the wrong direction. You know, that's a human rights violation.
So Mr. Peabody's talking about toilet paper being hung the wrong way. Meanwhile, we're talking about a convention against torture. Australia signed and ratified the Convention Against Torture. Convention Against Torture sets out the core obligations to prevent torture and other forms of mistreatment. On 19 May 2009, the Australian government signed OPCAT. On 9 February 2017, the Australian government announced its intention to ratify OPCAT, and in December 2017, the instruments of ratification were lodged with the UN. In signing and ratifying OPCAT, the Australian government has taken a significant step towards establishing enhanced oversight of Australian places of detention and improvement in conditions. And just to highlight again, the Commission has released a report outlining activities required to expedite Australia's approach to implementing the United Nations optional protocol to the Convention Against Torture and other cruel, inhuman or degrading treatment or punishment. Informed by our recent National OPCAT Symposium, see below, the roadmap to OPCAT compliance provides a clear pathway for governments across Australia to meet the approaching deadline for OPCAT compliance. October 2022, precisely when the New South Wales government didn't allow SPT inspectors into its facilities. And this guy's joking about it. If you've got nothing to hide, why wouldn't you let them in?
You know, yeah.
But you know, on a serious note, they could do some good in Victoria, because we do have a women's
Well, we were
prison.
saying North Korea, Iran, Venezuela, Victoria.
Victoria, yeah.
They're all lumped together.
Well, we have the biggest women's prison in Victoria that has at the moment an inmate who is born male, now identifies as female, but still has a male body functioning bits. And this is not just any sort of prisoner, one with a terrible track record, a sexual predator. And the women in that prison don't feel safe. They have put a petition together. They have tried to get the authorities to do something about this. And I know there are a group of women who are hoping that the UN actually does some good during this visit to Australia and says that human rights of these women is being infringed upon in the interest of this male predator. We'll see if that happens.
That would be fantastic. I wouldn't hold my breath. I mean, but, you know, the United Nations is, as we'll be talking about later, is not exactly on the side of, well, anyway.
Logic and common sense.
Yeah, now we see the typical pivot to turning everything into a Labor versus Liberal question, left versus right question, rather than simply addressing the fact that the New South Wales government didn't allow United Nations inspectors into its facilities, breaking an international treaty. No, we have to make it about Daniel Andrews again because it's okay, we can attack him as long as you're focused on left versus right stuff within our paradigm. Anyway, going to look at the next coverage of this same topic from Sky News Insiders.
To a worrying development concerning Australia's international reputation. Thanks to the New South Wales government, a United Nations delegation has been forced to suspend its junket, it's been forced to suspend a fact-finding mission to Australia, and the repercussions are terrible indeed.
The United Nations is tonight accusing Australia of a clear breach of human rights obligations. 4 UN investigators sent to inspect our prisons have cut their visit short after being refused access. The delegation was here to check conditions for detainees as part of an international treaty to prevent torture in custody.
Australia is an international embarrassment.
The United Nations has suspended its anti-torture mission to Australia after its inspectors were refused entry at several jails.
An anti-torture mission? Where, may we ask, was the location of this secret torture chamber?
And we're now told that on Tuesday night, 7 UN representatives turned up at the Queanbeyan courthouse. They demanded access to the jail cells and they wanted to talk to the prisoners. Thankfully, we stood our ground and told them no, because they didn't have prior approval. And now the UN is blowing up about it.
So let's get this straight here. The UN committee supposedly looks for instances of torture around the world. Very noble work. But instead of going to Africa or Russia or the Middle East or China, they go to Queanbeyan, New South Wales.
Yeah, that's right, Mr. Magoo. Queanbeyan, New South Wales. But it probably would have been better if the United Nations Subcommittee for the Prevention of Torture inspectors had gone to Long Bay Hospital, where we might have seen some interesting material if they were allowed in, which they wouldn't have been, because the New South Wales government totally isn't protecting themselves. Totally are not war criminals. Totally aren't trying to escape their international obligations under international law.
Are they for real? According to Human Rights Commissioner Lorraine Finlay, they sure are.
And it's really important to recognise the purpose of the UN delegation isn't to come and nitpick or complain or tell Australia what to do.
No, of course the UN wouldn't travel first class to a Western country to nitpick, would they? You know, just like this same subcommittee on prevention of torture did when it visited the UK in 2019 and said, quote, "The subcommittee wishes to put on record that the material conditions of the custody cells in the police establishments visited were generally very good. However," the subcommittee observed, "a lack of access to natural light in the cells at Bishopsgate Police Station in London."
No natural light? Of course not, you fools. They're cells, and we're talking about England here. There's no natural light for anybody. This from its trip to Sweden in 2008. In all remand prisons visited, the outdoor exercise facilities available for detainees held under restrictions were rather small, without any equipment, and of an oppressive nature.
Yes, but the subcommittee made those findings after they were able to access the facilities. None of this goes any way to justify the decision by the New South Wales government not to allow inspectors to see the facilities.
Those outdoor exercise facilities were of an oppressive nature, everyone. Seriously, does it get any sillier? Well, Yes, it does. Listen to this claim from the head of the delegation, Aisha Shujoon Mohammed.
We look at broader issues, systemic issues. We do not see whether the sandwiches are thin or not.
Oh, really? Well, here's an excerpt from your report following a visit to New Zealand in 2013. Quote, the subcommittee noted with concern the low nutritional value of the meals provided in the prisons it visited. Breakfast and lunch were monotonous, the latter invariably comprising 3 thin white bread sandwiches and a piece of fruit.
Oh, caught out telling fibs. And you wonder why no sensible person takes the UN seriously. As New South Wales Corrective Services Minister Jeff Lee correctly put it,
why should our taxpayers have to foot the bill for the UN and coming to Australia? You know, aren't they better off to go to places like Iran?
Exactly.
Yes, all this bad stuff happens in overseas places, dodgy. Arab places like Iran, not here in Australia, not at the Long Bay. Maximum security for medical and psychiatric remanded inmates. No, it's all overseas. Don't look here.
But sadly, these UN popinjays are not short of apologists on the ABC who allow them to get away with this poppycock.
First of all, I should say that the visit of SPT is not at cost to Australia or any of its states or territories. It is at our cost that we're undertaking this visit.
He also said, why should we pay for the UN? Well, we didn't pay for the UN. The UN paid for itself to get in.
oh, what?
For heaven's sake, Ellen Fanning, who do you think props up the UN in the first place? Yes, it's us mugs, who this year alone gave over $60 million to this parasitic popinjaic behemoth. We're the 8th biggest financial contributor to the UN, and this is how they spend it. Not just to junket, mind you, but also to usurp our sovereignty. They don't even bother hiding their agenda.
Usurp whose sovereignty, Rowan? If you're in a prison, if you're a victim of torture or cruel, dehuman, degrading treatment, then these inspectors are the only ones that could blow a whistle on that. Whereas, yes, for the state of New South Wales, yeah. But that is the very nature of the treaty that's been signed, it's been ratified. So this is a big deal, no matter how much of a small deal you guys try to paint it on the insiders.
Compromising our mandate and powers is something we take very seriously. Our mandate is not understood. We do not seek the permission of the authorities because we have that power and mandate by virtue of OPCAT. Well, I suppose Australia should walk the talk.
Speaking of walking the talk, where is it you're from, Miss Mohammed?
The head of the 4-member team from the UN Subcommittee on Prevention of Torture is Justice Aisha Shujoon Mohammed. She's a judge of the Supreme Court of the Maldives.
Ah, the Maldives! How interesting. Well, no doubt she'd be familiar with this U.S. State Department report about the situation in that country, and I quote, significant human rights issues include incredible reports of harsh and life-threatening prison conditions, serious problems with the independence of the judiciary, serious restrictions on free expression in media, including intimidation of journalists and online commentators.
So kind of like the arrest of Christo Lanka, Friendly Geordie's producer, kind of like what happened to Simeon Boykov, kind of like what happened to Uaki Skonen, Stephen Spires. All of this in the state of New South Wales. The Premier resigned after investigation into corruption. How much needs to go on in one place before you go, oh, something's rotten? And how does any of that, pointing out that the same sort of problems exist in other parts of the world, how does that excuse not allowing inspectors for the prevention of torture into New South Wales facilities?
Some significant issues there, Miss Mohammed, but please tell us about the serious human rights violations in Queanbeyan, New South Wales. Unbelievable. Incidentally, who was the idiot who decided we'd ratify this protocol in the first place?
This was the first inspection since the Turnbull government signed the deal to allow access.
The Turnbull government, say no more.
Well done, insiders. Blame the Turnbull government for signing the OPCAT treaty. When? Let's read from the government's website. The federal government has announced it will ratify and implement the OPCAT treaty. Few people will have heard of OPCAT, optional protocol to the Convention Against Torture. It creates no new legal rights, yet it could be the single most positive step this decade in improving conditions in all Australian places of detention. Well, no, it won't when the insiders run cover for the government, the correction minister blocking access to the prevention of torture inspectors. And yes, so they've finished this distraction piece by blaming the Turnbull government when the treaty creates no new laws. As it is really, the way I see it, this is all protected in the Hague 4 War on Land anyway. Prisoners of war. Prisoners of war, Article 4. Prisoners of war in the power of the hostile government, but not of the individuals or corps who capture them, they must be humanely treated. All their personal belongings, except arms, horses, and military papers, remain their property. And then it goes on to list, here we are, in Article 23, this is the Laws of War on Land, Hague 4. In addition to these prohibitions provided by special conventions, it is particularly forbidden, A, to employ poison or poisoned weapons, B, to kill or wound by treachery individuals belonging to the hostile nation or army, C, to kill or wound an enemy who, having laid down his arms or no longer having means of defence, has surrendered at discretion, D, to declare that no quarter will be given, E, to employ arms, projectiles or material calculated to cause unnecessary suffering, etc., etc. This is from 1907, ratified by Australia in 1910. So there's so many things wrong with the way the insiders are trying to cover for the New South Wales government. Yeah, so that we'll get specific about this, some of the things that have been going on in New South Wales in the next video.